All right, welcome everyone. This is the RTM Joint Committee presentations. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Well, you can't get to look who you're
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So that all of our members are aware, we have our Board of Ed budget books in those boxes over there. So grab a copy if you didn't, and sign the sign-out sheet to indicate that you've received it. The first item on our agenda is the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Bond Resolution.
Hello, good evening. You guys hear me? Sorry. Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I've got a whole committee here with me tonight. Apologize, I messed up the microphone here. Down on the far right here, or your left, is Ryan Scully, Chairman of our Golf Commission, Don DiMartino right next to him, and Craig Curley. Essentially, I'm going to turn it over to these guys who can speak with much more knowledge about this project than I can. So.
Good evening, everyone. My name is, like Anthony said, I'm Ryan Scully. I am the chairman of the Golf Commission, and I know I've been in front of you guys before giving a presentation, and this is the result of that presentation, which is the bond resolution that was previously approved by the Board of Finance. But in the meantime, thanks to you folks and all of your brethren who are not here tonight, we have seated the building committee, and the building committee has had their first meeting, and that occurred last week. And Craig Curley, who Anthony introduced earlier, is the chair, and Don DiMartino is on the committee as well. So I just wanted to make sure I was here so you guys see a consistent face. But I'll let Craig and Don, since they're really I'm just a liaison to the building committee. So I'll let Craig speak to the resolution if you guys have any questions. But like I said, I think we covered a lot of things previously. So
thank you, Ryan. This is going to be like hot potato because I'm going to turn it over to Don in a minute. One of the things that we did as a group before the building committee was formed was work with Ryan and Anthony to put together a budget to support the $250,000 appropriation that the Board of Selectmen put forth and subsequently has gone through the various meetings. But Don was instrumental in pulling together the numbers to support that $250,000. I think that's the crux of your questions tonight. So, hot potato, I'm going to hand it over to Don.
Hello, everybody. So we had a $250,000 funding request that's been approved up till tonight, and that was based on an average construction cost of $5 million. There's different options between $3.8 million up to $5.8 million that we looked at in certain scopes, which are rough scopes at this point. So the basis of 5% of construction cost is where we landed for the $250,000. So with that said, you know, we're hoping that that can be approved and we can launch on our design release with the architects and construction managers.
Have you concluded the presentation? Anything further? Can you talk about the scope of the plan a little bit?
Sure.
What you have in mind?
So, you know, it's kind of, okay. I'll talk
I'm
into
sorry,
it.
Representative Pierce, did you mean this plan for the 250 or the overall project?
The plan for the 250.
Okay. So it's kind of reverse engineering because we're trying to get a design cost that's based on construction cost that's based on scope of work. And we don't know either of those at a definite level. So we had to go back to the 2008 feasibility study. And in that case, the cost estimate was for a basic renovation and a slight addition, it was about $3.2 million worth of gut the place, add a small addition to the kitchen, and renovate the cart barn, and that was at 3.2 million. So then we looked at what would it take to really build a new one, and we came up with 5.8 million if you took the same square footage, added a new cart barn, and did the $1 million worth of site work. So we had a 3.2 million and a 5.8 million for total new facility. And where we land in the middle at 5 million, that's how we derive the 250,000 as the design funding that would include construction management, that would include the town's third-party owner's rep that is already on board. So there are a lot of pieces that dip into that 250, but the bulk of it is for an architect and engineer to come up with drawings that can be bid to get a construction cost estimate.
Thank you. Do any members of the body have questions on this item? Representative Jacobs?
Matt Jacobs, District 3. Is the 5% an industry standard?
It is 4 to 6%, so we took 5, and it depends to what level you bring the drawings. When you get to final design, which will come out in the construction budget, when and if that's approved, you run up to 8 to 10%. But to get a construction cost estimate, 5% is an industry standard.
Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Through you, I think to Anthony, when we did, I'm going to go revisit the process of, it seems when we've asked for, I'll call this seed money, this has been a practice I've seen instituted on school projects, or what we've done in school projects for the past 10 or 15 years. I don't recall us doing this for a town project, asking for seed money. I could be mistaken. Where did this discussion come up to ask for money ahead of time? I remember when we did Penfield, you came to us, we did it, the initial, before the hurricane, we did it in, I believe, 2 or 3 phases. We didn't ask for seed money, I just remember being here and it happening. Like, here's your plans for phase 1. Then when we went through, phase 2, I'm just speaking to something that you've handled in your department.
Sure.
What precipitated this to go this route and ask for 250 up front? I understand we do it for BOE projects. I can't recall doing it on the town.
I believe this is I don't believe there's any other town projects, and I could be mistaken. I can only speak for really the Recreation Department. But since 2011, this has been the process that I'm aware of that's been in place, is to go for seed money first. Whether there's been other town projects that have come forward that way, I'm not sure. But this has been, and we did model it after basically the BOE. Here's a set of ed specs, program specs, building specs, and this is what it's going to cost us to do, and that's how we came up with the seed money amount.
Tomorrow, could you get back to Mike or somebody and just see if this is I'll call it new process. I don't know if it is a new process. It just strikes me as unusual that we're doing it this way. I could be wrong, though.
No, I could try to find out when it was implemented. I want to say it was around 2011, but I can get back to the moderator about that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to add to that point is, and I also cannot speak to whether this is a new process or modeled off after the BOE, but I do know that the town did look at potentially renovating this facility back in 2008. They did form a committee, and they spent a fair amount of money on designs and such. Back in 2014, they revisited the project again. They did not move forward in 2008 because of financial issues. It was following the financial crisis. There was a hurricane. There were all kinds of things that kind of came along. And frankly, this project just wasn't it wasn't high enough on the priority list for the town. And I think that was the right decision at the time. But in 2014, the town revisited this issue. And the Town Facilities Commission looked at the viability of the building and determined whether it was in any condition worth saving or otherwise. And those findings were put forth to this committee, I think, a month or 2 ago when we had the last set of meetings on this. And I think we're at a point now where the building is on its last leg, the facility is on its last leg, and I think we as a body, as a town, have effectively assessed the viability of the building. The next step is going to be with engineering and architects. And I think that whether this is a new process or a unique process, I think the Board of Selectmen recognized that the seed money was important for the architecture and engineering work that would need to be done.
Can I just add that I believe part of the reason for the seed money is to really develop the scope. So you couldn't go forth for construction funding if we don't know the costs. So we put the 250 out there to get design drawings that are developed far enough to get a real construction cost estimate to get funding for the construction project. From what I understood, we had $3 million in the waterfall, and we've already talked that it's, at least $5 million. We're trying to nail down that cost so that we can really get the right number.
Further questions? Ed, you still have?
Yeah, just to follow up. Anthony, I know over the past year, there's been discussion back and forth, hopefully partnering, finding somebody, a sponsor, something along those lines to alleviate, like we did down at the Beanery. Do you feel if we start this process where we fund this seed money, that eliminates that route, because now somebody will look at it and say, well, why would I partner with them? It looks like they're going to do it on their own.
No, I don't. I think actually it might do the opposite, where it'll show that the town is invested in the facility. There's definitely opportunity here for the building committee, for my department to reach out and try to find a partner to go in on this with us that would maybe give some money towards that in exchange for a long-term lease like we did down at the Beanery building, like you're talking about with tennis. And I know this is something that we've spoken, Ryan and I have spoken about, and Craig, so we were all on board with that one.
And Representative Basin, I can add to that. There's been a pretty big precedent set for that across other Fairfield County towns who have developed their clubhouse. There's been a pretty consistent support from usually a concessionaire partner, but could be a sponsor or anything like that. And where, for example, in Stamford, the concessionaire gave $250,000 in exchange for a 10-year lease as part of the project when they did theirs. But that's just one example, and there's plenty that I could cite if you ever want to see the numbers. So I think that, like Anthony said, I assume this would actually help that process, because they'll be able to see, A, they're actually going to build it, and B, they'll have an idea of how big it's going to be and things like that, so they can try to determine what would work for them. So I do think it will help. I hope so anyways.
I'm good, thank you.
Further questions? Representative Lefkowitz?
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. Can you talk about the 40,000 visitors to the golf course? I know we talked through this when you were before this body before, but could you just remind me, unique visitors, residents, non-residents, how many rounds of golf?
Sure. I think it's roughly about 30,000 resident rounds, and the rest is made up of non-residents. We have a pretty consistent 30,000 resident rounds pretty much every year, kind of no matter what happens. The other between 10 and 15,000, sometimes we go up to 45, sometimes we go to 40. A lot of that's really just based on weather, frankly. We're such a weather-driven commodity. I mean, when the weather's good, we do a lot of rounds. When the weather's bad, we don't do a lot of rounds. If the weather's going to be 70 degrees tomorrow and it stays warm and we can open in March, we'll have a really good year. If we get a foot of snow on March 15th, then we won't have as good of a year. And it's really that simple for the non-resident. But the resident rounds are pretty consistent.
And how many unique residents is that? Can you break that down? How many people are actively different users?
About 3,500, I guess, roughly, is the most consistent. That's how many golf IDs we sell. So
Residents, non-residents?
3,500 residents,
3,500 residents. And
roughly.
And you described, when you said it allows you the opportunity to develop the scope, can you just talk about that, what you mean more specifically?
Can you repeat that?
You said it allows you to develop the scope of the project?
It allows us to develop, first we'd come up with the scope of what's necessary for that facility. What is the bare bones requirement for the pro shop, the restaurant, the locker area, the cart barn, and the architect will come up with options for, here's your basic need. It's almost like an ed spec. Here's what you have to do to support that golf course. Then we would look at what's affordable. They do different cost estimates on the renovation plus the small addition, and they knock that all the way up to a full-blown knock it down and rebuild it. And what does that cost? And then we'd see where we land budget-wise, make sure that we're not dreaming and up at $10 million for this facility, and try to narrow in on what we think is the best option for the town and the most affordable option for the town. We'd run it through all the bodies to get approval of that scope, and then we go out to bid to get a real construction estimate.
And one more question, if I could follow up. But that doesn't include necessarily an assessment of other facilities that might be appropriate at that place, like an ice rink or a pool or...
It does not, but we've been tasked with looking at the flexibility to add those on. So not to landlock ourselves, you know, if there's room for a skating rink or pick a facility in the future, we would make sure that we've, you know, got the flexibility to add on.
I think I can just add to that. I think this board is well aware that the committee charge did change throughout this process, and that was something that was scaled out of it by the Selectman's office, where originally it was a much broader scope, but when the final charge went to the bodies, it was focused pretty much strictly on golf. And I think the way the first Selectman's office views it is having those things available in a phase 2 or a phase 3, whatever it is down the road. That's how they're viewing it, and I believe that's how the charge reads. So that's the plan moving forward at this point.
Yeah. And I'll just elaborate on that. I think the Board of Selectmen have made it pretty clear that in this economy, we don't want to overspend, and we have to be mindful of not overdeveloping. So we need to define the building committee, which formed and had its first meeting this past week, needs to define clearly what the need is for the golf operations without disqualifying a potential future phase 2 or phase 3, whether that's an ice skating rink, whether that's a paddle tennis court area or something like that. So we would need to be mindful of the geography of where things are placed, so that we don't want to put the cart barn in a place that would then not allow us to logically have any room for anything else. So I think the building committee's charge is going to be to define the need, define the potential expansion, at least in terms of being mindful of that in where things might be placed, but not necessarily the spending the money for that phase 2 or phase 3. We just need to make sure we don't put, if it is a tear down and rebuild, we don't put the building in the middle of the lot, which then would not allow for anything anywhere else.
Representative Herron?
Hi. In calculating the cost basis for the anticipated design fee, why was option 1 not included in the average?
We felt that option 1 was not feasible, and that was kind of the consensus of the team, that reusing what is there is just the showers and the locker rooms and the whole pro shop where it's situated just didn't make any sense to just renovate that in the configuration that it is. So we took the new construction and the new underground cart barn as, say, the worst case scenario, because if we didn't have enough money to design for that and we only got enough money to renovate, we'd run out of design money.
I'll add some color there too, because I think this is important. I know a lot of the people on this on the RTM have not been here for the more than 10 years. Some have, but not all. Again, the town looked at the feasibility study for renovating or replacing the clubhouse in 2008. The numbers that Don was talking about are an extension of those 2008 work, But that was mothballed and nothing was done in 2008. This building was originally built in 1971, 72 timeframe. And in 2014, when the Town Facilities Commission was asked to review the building and the grounds, look at the mechanicals, look at everything, the Town Facilities Commission basically said this building is beyond its useful life. So I think if we as a town were to have moved forward in 2007, 2008, renovation was an option. I think in 2018, I think that ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Further questions from the body? Representative Walk.
Jay Walk, District 5. I just have a quick question or two quick. So if the body approves the project, first off, when would you start? And then would it be after the golf season? Because would that disrupt the golfers and...
Yeah, excellent question. I think one of the highest priorities of the building committee is to make sure that whatever plan is put forth is a plan that's put together that would allow for the least amount of disruption to the golf operations. I think the intention is to keep the golf course open throughout the whole process. So part of that is being smart about when we start. My guess is that means that the building, if we were to break ground or start, it would be after Labor Day. Now, realistically, there's a lot to be done from a design phase, from an approval perspective, between now and then. Honestly, I don't think that means this Labor Day. I think it potentially could be Labor Day 2019. Realistically. So I think we as a building committee, when we met, Mike Tetra was part of that first meeting. We asked him about the timeline as well, what his expectations were. He made it clear that he's very concerned that the building right now may not make it till next Labor Day, to be honest with you. The mechanicals are failing, the roof is failing, the windows are failing. But if we have to wait to get the right design and get through all the approvals with all the questions answered in advance, then that's what we'll do.
So how long would it take to build the new facility?
Right.
A couple of months?
I think from start to finish, it's probably about an 8-month project. It could be longer depending on weather, depending on what the winter looks like. I think the expectation would be that perhaps we would roll in a couple of trailers for the pro shop and the operations and the concessionaire so that the services could be the same. My guess is that the cart barn could be taken down in a couple of days, and foundation work is another week, and then the new, if it's a prefab cart barn, it could be up in a week. So the cart barn piece is an easy one if we keep it in its same footprint. The building also could likely be torn down fairly quickly, with the exception of we don't know what remediation is in front of us. So we have to be mindful of that.
Oh, thank you. And I agree with First Selectman Tetro that the building is definitely in need of repair. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think that's from the Golf Commission's point of view. I mean, I think we trying to plan on having one season being disrupted. So whether or not that's 2019 or 2020, we try to keep it to just the one golf season, and I can just push the cart barn over. It'll just fall, so it's no problem.
Just one other item is if we add on in a different location, that could potentially take place during the season. You know, you take part of a putting green and just kind of logistically separate it and build there so that you have the 6 to 12 months that can be done in one straddle one winter.
Further questions? Representative Herron?
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. I just wanted to follow up on the question that I had. Am I misrepresenting you then that a renovation has been determined that it's not a viable option at this time and it's only a new construction?
No, it is still a viable option, but to clarify, we are looking for funding to cover the most expensive or the worst case scenario, because if we based our funding on a reno, we wouldn't have enough to finish the design if it's really $6 million.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? Representative McDermott?
Mark McDermott, District 7. I think this is for Anthony. What is the daily capacity for golfers, and what percentage of tee times are booked every day? Just an average, I don't need, or maybe weekends are busier, or Friday through Sunday. But a lot of this is based on increasing golfers coming to play at the course. So how are we doing today?
I'm going to pass this one to Ryan. He might know this answer.
I'm not exactly sure what the capacity is on a day, Craig. I don't know if you remember from when you were on the commission, but when it comes to tee times being booked, again, it's so weather based. But when the weather's nice and it's a nice day, then we're booked clear every single day till 2 o'clock, hands down, no problem. There's a slow period usually between 2 and then when people get out of work, and then it picks up from about 4:30 until the end of the day. But when we talk about more people playing, it's really not about more rounds. It's about attracting non-resident rounds. That's the way I think you have to look at it when you're talking about if you're talking about strictly profitability standpoint, which I'm assuming that's what you're getting towards, because the non-resident rounds collect a lot more money for the town than a resident round does. So that's really where the competitive edge lies for us, is trying to keep it very competitive for non-residents, because non-resident rounds which allows us to subsidize for residents. Right now, residents pay $30 to play the course. A non-resident pays $54 to play the course. So the fact that they pay $54 allows us to only spend $30 for the resident golfer. So.
Okay. Personally, I don't go to play golf just because the clubhouse is nice. I go to play the course. So that's just my personal opinion. And, to me, I look at this, your 3 scenarios. The third scenario to me is like a country club personally. The only places I go that have cart barns underneath the building are country clubs. So it seems like a lot of money. It's basically $6 million with this $250,000 up front, correct?
Correct.
So, I'd like to know a percentage during the day. Is there a 9-hole option as well after a certain time?
There is.
I've only played 18 holes there, so.
Yep. So if we offer 9 holes, we offer 18 holes, and the percentage is, I can give you an annual percentage. We operate right now at, like we said, between 40 and 45,000 rounds, which is approximately 85% capacity. That's industry standard, is pretty optimal. Anything above that, you're going to get more wear and tear, which costs more money, means you have to maintain the course. More rounds through also slow down pace of play. So right now we are operating essentially where we want to be. Adding the new clubhouse is not necessarily going to give us more rounds. I think we'll see an uptick for sure, but again, I think Ryan hit it right on the head with we're trying to attract the non-residents to stay and play because they pay almost double, therefore they get to subsidize.
I guess, are we going to attract enough non-residents to pay for this thing?
And the outings as well. Well, and the outings as well is another important aspect, because right now we only have about 2 or 3 outings per year at the golf course, and that is a direct result of the clubhouse. 100%, no doubt. That's why people don't have outings at H. Smith Richardson, because the clubhouse does not have the capacity to house a tournament. It's plain and simple. So that's going to be a big increase right away no matter what. And I know I agree with you. I'm obviously an avid golfer, and I go for the course as well, but people don't come because of the clubhouse. It's not that they come because of it. It's that they won't come because of it. And then they don't stay afterwards, which is another key. And when you talk about women golfers, we have one of the strongest women's golfing clubs in the state of Connecticut, and it is brutal for them. I mean, this will only increase women's play at the course because, I mean, if you guys ever, and I know a number of you took a tour with me and the pro, when you walk into that women's locker room, you can't imagine how any woman comes and plays golf there. So I do think that those are critical areas for us. But like Anthony said, and I'll repeat it again, it's really not about more rounds. It's about attracting non-residents to play, as well as just making it, compatible with the course. The course won best public course in Connecticut 2 years ago, and the clubhouse doesn't match the course. I mean, it has to. We're not looking for the Taj Mahal, but I definitely think that it's important to have the clubhouse reflect how great the course is while people play it, and so I mean that's sort of the way we look at it, anyways.
I'll just expand on that and touch on a point that you made. I do agree with Ryan's comment that it's not so much. I do expect that there should be some uptick in play. I think there's going to be a curiosity factor, a novelty factor. If we build a nice destination, maybe they stay a little longer, maybe they come back for a second or third round each year as a non-resident, whereas they may, instead of coming and playing once. So that will definitely help. But if this body is expecting that non-resident increased play will pay for this clubhouse, it won't. I don't want anyone to misunderstand that. That's not what anyone is trying to put forth. I think it's more a question of when you have a home, you have to paint it. You have to replace the roof. You have to sometimes replace the furnace. This building is past its useful life. And if we, and I didn't mention septic. We've got a plumbing and septic problem. It's on the verge of a Board of Health problem. If we don't repair or replace this facility, it's going to get to the point where we just can't use the building at all. And I think at some point the town has to look at this as an asset that it's reinvesting in without necessarily looking at a return on investment for the dollar spent. It's more just maintaining the facility as a viable facility.
Representative Iacono.
Thank you, Pamela Iacono, District 8. Actually, Mr. Curley, you just hit something right on the head. That's, I think, a big concern of a lot of members here and of constituents, that we understand fully that the building is past its useful life. It doesn't work anymore and it needs to be redone. What people are really getting concerned about is that we're building a private club up there. There is a perceived notion, whether true or false, that this is, quote unquote, and these are words that constituents have said to me, a boys' club. And, you know, if you're on the golf commission, no offense to people who are on the golf commission, no offense to the men or women who are involved in the leagues up there, that this is a project for them and it's not for town residents. I'm not saying that's true, but I'm telling you that that is the public perceived notion. So I think it's really important that you continue to reiterate that your main focus is to build a viable clubhouse for the town of Fairfield, not for the golfers that happen to belong to some membership clubs up there.
Yeah.
That's my first point. I don't know if you
Okay,
feel
yeah,
free
no,
to address that.
Yeah,
or
no,
not.
I appreciate that commentary, and I think that's consistent with the mission of the building committee. I think of the 11 people on the building committee, there are 3 regular golfers. And they're obviously all town residents. Some have not been to the, they've never seen the clubhouse before, but they come to us with a background as a professional owner's rep, for example. So we have a pretty diverse group on the building committee. I think it's been made very clear that we're not building a Taj Mahal. We're not building a private club. I agree with the sentiment that if we were to put the carts underneath, that is very much a private club construct. But to be candid, we received very clear direction from Jim Walsh on the Board of Finance that that's an option that he wants explored, not because he wants to build the a private club, but because if we have a standalone structure for the carts, it's a second structure to heat. It's a second structure with a roof. There's a lower maintenance. There's a thought of lower maintenance if the carts are contained in the same space. You don't have to worry about heating a cart barn if it's underneath in the basement. You don't have to worry about the roof because there's only one roof. Things like that. However, in response to that direction and request, the indication was that, yes, the building committee will explore that as an option, but part of that means we have to drill boreholes, test holes to see where this ledge is, whether it's even an option. And if it is an option, how much extra is that option going to be, and is it worth it? Candidly, I'm not sure it is. But as a building committee, I think it's our responsibility to explore those options and address those items and make a educated decision.
Right. And to follow up then on Mr. Walsh's recommendation, and I think it was a good one, that you should be exploring all of your options. You just mentioned a prefab cart barn. And if that makes more economic sense, then yes, I do think you should be exploring all the different options and coming back with, you know, what's the best viable thing, not only just from construction, but from then management and running the facilities going forward, because I don't want to burden the town with something that's going to cost money where we could save in the long run.
Yep, and while we're on this point, before we move on, the other point that I want to make is that it's important for not just the golfers of this town, where if they're regular users, yes, they're going to have the benefit of a new facility. But it's important for your constituents, everyone's constituents here, that residents of Fairfield realize that the golf operations for the town of Fairfield has never run a deficit year over year. It's always been a contributing asset to the town of Fairfield. Over a 10-year stretch prior to me joining as I was joining the Golf Commission in '09, we looked back 5 years, and then for the 5 years forward, I believe it was a $2.5 million surplus over the previous 10 years. And then that helped us substantiate the business plan that allowed us to reinvest at roughly $100,000 a year into maintaining the course to a quality standard that would attract play to the point that was made earlier, because the course was in good condition. And we do have one of the best courses in the state, and we are getting that non-resident play. All of that goes to the non-resident play goes to subsidizing the rates to keep rates for residents lower, and overall, year over year, revenues are fully loaded expenses. Revenues are exceeding fully loaded expenses, including bond costs and otherwise. So it is a contributing asset to the town, so it should not be viewed as a burden to the non-golfers of the town.
And also, Representative Iacono, one thing to really keep in mind with that is the maintenance costs are going to be, the cost savings here is going to be tremendous as well. We used 4,200 gallons of heating oil this winter. I mean, so that alone.
No, I think you guys have clearly, for me, made a case for why the building needs to be redone. That's not the issue. The issue is a little bit, and maybe this is out of the scope of asking for the $250,000. It's just really a reminder that there's some PR work to be done here with the public, that this is for the town of Fairfield. And yes, I get it on the revenue, and I know that it's never been a loss. You know, and the second piece of that is youth programming, because I know you have some, but you don't have a lot up at that course. And if we're going to invest up to $6 million up there, I'd love for us to attract the First Tee program off of Fairchild Wheeler and over at Smith Richardson. That's just one example.
Well,
I just put that out there. You don't have to even respond
I can tell
to
you,
it.
we looked into it, and they don't think we're a fit, the First
Okay.
Tee, because it's for underprivileged communities, not for Fairfield. That's what we were told. I mean, we did look into it. I'm serious.
Okay, well.
So just so you know, I mean, that
All
was
right,
a response
but
we
there's
got.
certainly plenty of camps and opportunities that the Parks and Recs Commission can work on to
Definitely.
attract
Agreed, yeah. And-
youth,
and-
our youth golfers
Definitely.
to the sport of golfing.
Yeah, for
and,
sure.
And that would be a really great thing. And if we're going to invest this type of money in it, we really ought to think about getting our youth involved up there as well.
100% agree with
That'll
that.
help alleviate your stigma of this being a I have no other word but boys club. I'm
No,
sorry.
I understand. I understand there's a perception of that, and we 100% agree with that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. You'll hear me keep harping on this until this is, shovels in the ground. My other question, back to the $250,000. I thought that the first selectman had put together a committee for an owner's rep or a construction manager or something, and their first charge was going to be this committee. Where is that? Is that tied into this? How much did they have to do with what you're doing now, or nothing at all?
Yeah, so Colliers is the owner's rep that the town is engaged. They are part of this project. They were not in attendance at our first meeting, which was an organizational meeting, but they will be in attendance at our next meetings when they'll have a representative going forward. The cost of that will come out of the $250,000. I think during the design phase, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were going to run somewhere between roughly $10,000 for the first few months as we got started, and then a good portion of the work that they would do would be during the construction phase, so it would actually come out of most of the 250 would end up going towards the actual design work and the architectural work. Yeah.
So we have done the legwork without them up to this point, and they'll be at our next meeting and we're going to talk about their scope and make sure that we're not spending money too frivolously on the owner's rep. You know, get them to a minimum scope, because we've already got a draft RFP for a design that we can just take, let them look at it, and move on with the bid process.
Yeah, I've worked with them before on some other town projects, so that's a very good organization. Thank you very much.
Further comment from the body? Representative Beauvais?
I got two. Lauren Beauvais, District 7. I have a question. In looking at the construction costs, I don't see anything in here, remediation for things like usually come up like radon, mite, or termite damage, or God forbid, asbestos or anything like that. Is there, I know, is there anything in the budget for that, or has it already been
There is
put in
not,
this?
and we have talked about that with the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, that
So this number could get
remediation
bigger.
would be a separate budget other than what
Scary.
is going for now.
And can I ask one more question that's not the same? The tournaments that you're talking about, I agree that would be great if we had a better space for tournaments, because it's a great revenue generator. Do you have any idea how much money that could be made? Considering nobody really wants to send, tournaments there right now, what could we get out of tournaments?
I mean, there's really no way, unfortunately, there's really no way to quantify it, because we just don't know what the result would be.
Like one tournament, what would that be?
Yeah, it's usually about $100 times 120 golfers.
And that's all free and clear money, or is some of that goes to infrastructure, et cetera?
Well, yeah, it would still go to the car, and
Like,
not
so
all
if it's
free and
$100
clear.
a head, what do we get in the town?
Yeah. Yeah, probably like out of 100, I would say $40 probably would be fair, but I'm just, don't hold me. Yeah, don't hold me to it. Yeah, don't hold me to it. I mean, but
No, it's good to
I've been in a
just for
million
my
golf
own-
tournaments, and I've ran a bunch of golf tournaments, so typically that's usually what the golf entails, but
Because the Democratic town committee where I used to live would have golf tournaments, and lots of money was raised, and it was great for everybody. And the Republican town committee, everyone did that, and we could do that here. We have a great opportunity. So I'd like to see that.
I've got some Representative Pastelli?
Sharon Pastilli, District 3. I was just wondering, in terms of looking at the feasibility of different options, if you have information on similar, like courses of similar quality within about a 40-minute radius, so that we can get a better understanding of what the revenues are that come in from different types of activities, because we would like to see, we do only want to replace what needs to be replaced at this point because of the economic environment that we're in. But longer term, in terms of making this the best return on investment, it would be really good to look at what these other activities are that could be added to attract more residents and non-residents in general to the property in inclement weather, or during times when you wouldn't be using it for golf. So it would be the highest use of the facility year-round. So are there any other benchmarks for that in the state?
I mean, obviously that's something that the building committee is going to have to look at, and I think it's something that the first selectman, we did talk about having it be more attractive year-round, but the only direct revenue that I can point to from the clubhouse is the rent that the concessionaire does. I can tell you what, unfortunately, I did a lot of research and I know what the rent is that most of the surrounding towns are paying, and I can certainly give you those numbers if you want them. I mean, right now, or I can do it. I can send you an email to the moderator, or however you want to handle it.
So a concept to keep in mind is, like, when you look at ski areas. So for instance, Mohawk Mountain Ski Area has stand-up paddleboarding during the summer. Like, I don't know how much they make on stand-up paddleboarding, but then you look at other, ski areas, what they do during the summer to attract people. So it's the opposite concept for golf, like what you can do to attract people to the facility in the off-season to make it a revenue generator without costing any additional wear and tear on the facility.
Thank you. While I appreciate the question, it's outside of the scope right now of the charge that this building committee's been given, but that is something that the Parks and Rec Commission and the Parks and Recreation Department will be exploring, other options to make that facility year-round. Thank you.
Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I'd like to speak to the need for public relations. To follow up on Representative Lefkowitz's comment about how many residents use the facility every year. I think you should look beyond just how many, in a 12-month period or in that year, because I have 5 men that have it, and they might not have their pass every year, but over a 5-year period, they are active golfers and they actively use Smith Richardson. So I think you're selling yourself short by saying it's only 3,500, because over a 5 or 10-year period, you're going to get a larger percentage of the town that actually uses the facility. So I'd like to say that. And I would also like to follow up on the Boys Club concept. I would ask you to make sure that when it comes back, that the women's locker room and the men's locker room are identical. That there is no discrepancy. There is no discrepancy in size of lockers, things that are available to the people. I would like them to be exactly the same. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Duly noted. Yeah, that's something that the building committee will discuss. I think they have different needs in terms of, I think in the men's locker room, there are roughly 50 to 60 full-size lockers that are used to store the equipment. The ladies don't have that demand. But I will say that whether it's a lounge area or the bathroom facilities themselves, I think there's a need not just to make them equal in size, but larger in size for the ladies, because where it's appropriate.
So you're telling me that men need a full-size locker and women can use a half-size locker?
No. If the demand, that's not what I'm saying. No. What I'm saying is that the building committee has representation from the ladies' golf clubs, and the building committee will also solicit input from the seniors club, the men's club, the ladies seniors club, the ladies 9 holes club, all of the different clubs as to what their specific needs are for their space, whether it's the locker room, the bathroom facilities, or showers, or otherwise. To date, the ladies' locker room does not utilize full-size lockers not because of the supply, but because of the demand. If there's a demand for full-size lockers in golf bag storage, the building committee will take that and work with that. But to date, there hasn't been the demand, and we wouldn't want to utilize valuable square footage if it's not going to be a revenue source. All of the lockers are rented each year and generate revenue, but that right now that is a men's locker event. Perhaps the building committee could look at the storage in a public access spot that's not gender specific, so that it's apart from the lounge and the bathroom facilities. If that's something that makes sense, we would explore that.
Okay. Also, please keep all those things in mind, because the size locker and you want it to be representative
If I can
of the
just
taxpayers.
interject, the finishes in men's or ladies' locker room bathrooms will all be identical. That's a typical design standard, that you use the same tile, same sink, same countertop, same benches, so that would all be mirror image of each other.
And make sure they're guest lockers as well. Thank you.
Further questions from the body? Representative Gale?
So I did come to visit the club, and I was definitely convinced by the visit that I should support this funding. Sorry, Hannah Gale, District 6. But I did also notice a couple of things in my visit that I would like to bring up. Number one is this whole business about the Smith Richardson being a moneymaker for the town, but when I saw the condition of the carport and the fact that there was snow and rainwater dripping down through numerous holes all through the structure directly on electrical sockets, it was extremely upsetting. And so I don't quite understand why there isn't a line item in the operation budget that would have allowed someone to simply put up Band-Aid measures. And there seems to be some sort of a discrepancy between, if you're making so much money, how did conditions get that bad?
Well, there is a maintenance line item in the DPW budget, and it gets maintained every year. And they've been patching that roof for the past 10 years with the hope that this building is going to be replaced every year. So it has been patched. There are tarps on that roof now. We can't even put a physical body on that roof without them falling through.
Wow.
But DPW was able to get up there, with all their equipment and tarp it. So there's 2 tarps on there now, and we're going to get through and keep patching it until that building's replaced. Rather than spend the money, we don't want to throw good money away for no reason. So.
Okay, I just, I respect that, and I can see how that could have happened because it was in such bad shape, but I still sort of think that there should be more looking at what the operating budget really is, and more towards maintenance, staying within the organization of Smith Richardson, and more just responsibility being taken in that regard. And then I have one thing to say about the men's club aspect. I was really impressed with finding out that you guys have used so much of the funding to put in women's teas, and it's become a course that is enjoyed and appreciated by so many women, and that is really, I'm excited by that. I did notice that the women's locker room seemed to have A, it was clean. B, there seemed to be some sort of an organization going on where these people the women who are there had brought in things at their own expense in order to make it a really nice space. And in contrast, the men's locker room was really dirty. I have almost never seen anything so dirty. And so I'm wondering if, as we're, looking forward into, how the men at this club can take ownership, if there could be some sort of effort made, at some sort of contribution and reformation. And my last thing to say is, I really love the fireplace, and I hope you keep it.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we appreciate the comments, and there's always a difference between the men's and women's, so the way that they take care of it. And I don't think it's surprising when you go in there how they do it. So, for sure.
Further questions from members of the body? Representative Siebert.
Joe Siebert, District 5. More of a comment. I'm an avid golfer and formerly a member of a private club. I'd play that course if there was no clubhouse. So the course is not a problem. Absolutely not. And I agree with the comments by Representative Iacono that efforts need to be made to make it more diverse. Absolutely the case. I would say that even with the current condition of that clubhouse, that in the off-season, my family goes there to watch football games, neighbors, they snowshoe, and so it attracts people, even under the current conditions, to that clubhouse. So I'm just thinking about what potentially that clubhouse could be for really good events, right? And it's just not sustainable for those kind of events. So I'm thinking from a revenue generation standpoint, the potential of that clubhouse could be phenomenal. And I'm not even talking about the game of golf, which I love. So that's kind of my view on it.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Lefkowitz.
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. And I just would like you to speak to that revenue generating idea. I get it, the intangibles, and I get that the club pays for itself. And maybe it is a matter of public relations, but I don't quite get where the money-making piece of it comes in, or what the cost analysis piece is going to be, and how we can justify to our constituents that we're spending potentially $5-6 million. Maybe it's more people watching football and all of that, but I would love to understand more broadly what that really does look like.
Yeah, that's a Excellent question, but it's really a tough one to answer. I asked this very similar question of Mike Tetro last week when the building committee met, because we received a similar question from the Board of Finance, and we talked about how do we explain or how do we present the return on investment for the $6 million, and we actually talked about that for quite a bit in our meeting. But one of the things, there's no one piece that will allow us to kind of formulate what the answer is, and it's a lot of little pieces. So one part of it is the hope that perhaps we attract more golf tournaments, which we really don't do right now. So that's one item. Generally speaking, we hope to attract more non-resident play, and not a huge amount, but a small amount, a reasonable amount. That's the second part. That's on the golf side of the equation. The other part is, perhaps right now we are leasing out the space to a concessionaire for the restaurant. My numbers are probably dated, but I think it's roughly $36,000 a year, roughly $3,000 a month that the town collects. I believe the restaurant in Greenwich collects roughly $100,000. Now, I can't say that we're going to find somebody who's going to pay $100,000 to rent out the restaurant once it's rebuilt, because it's got to go through the public bid process. But certainly, if there's a more attractive space that's more functional and new, the hope is that there would be several bidders with interest for the space. The other part that was mentioned at the start of this meeting is, do we partner up with somebody in exchange for a long-term lease where they might contribute capital for the rebuild of a portion of the restaurant? That's certainly something that the building committee needs to investigate and explore. Exactly how that plays out, I can't say. So I think the expectation is that we would attract more from golf tournaments. We would attract a modest increase in rounds in general. We would hopefully, most certainly, collect more in rent. But the other part of it is what Ryan talked about as well. Because the building's in such disrepair and the DPW is up there almost daily, certainly weekly, to get the boiler working again. The building doesn't have insulation, so we're burning through roughly 5,000 gallons of fuel oil a winter. The windows are single pane from 1972. The septic system, it really is a problem. So we're going to be spending money to keep the status quo that we won't spend it once this rebuild occurs. All of those pieces have to come together. But how that math actually comes together, that's a really tough question to answer.
Yeah. Further questions from the body? Representative Lopez?
For the current concessionaire, Aaron Lopez, District 2, how long is the lease? Is it a year-to-year?
The way that, and Anthony's done a great job with this and his predecessor, Mr. Lombardo, right now it's been year to year with the hope that this project would, eventually kick off.
Is there a bidding process each year?
There's a bidding process each year, but this current concessionaire has been the only bidder the last 3, I believe, times.
Okay.
So no one else has even taken a shot at it. One of the restaurants came in who is a concessionaire at numerous other, and they just took one look and they just walked right out. They didn't even make a bid. So what we would get for rent, I don't know, but I know it will be more than what we're getting now. I just don't know what that number would be.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Representative Vergara?
Jill Vergara, District 7. Are you not contemplating increasing user fees to help generate more revenue?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a golf commission question. Yeah, I mean, we try to consistently increase revenues as we have as the budget. It's part of the 10-year plan to support the 10-year plan, as well as to just support the budget of the course, because it went up another 7% this year, and it doesn't get cheaper to run the course. So, and we do definitely do that. We've been very consistent with it. I would have a difficult time raising it based directly on this, but it's definitely something that we always visit, just because we try to stay competitive with the other courses in the area. that's really, like I said, non-resident rounds is the key, right? So we can't be priced $4 or $5 higher per round than Toshua, because then everyone will go play Toshua. So we always have to make sure that we're competitive with the non-resident rates. So I do think that if we do have enough a new clubhouse, that's certainly going to give us ammunition to, as a commission, revisit the prices and possibly move them up. A good example of that is the golf carts. We hadn't raised the golf cart prices in 3 years or 4 years, but we had a new fleet of carts come in, and we raised the $2 per person per cart for this year because it's brand new carts, and it's hard for any club, whether it's the men's club, women's club, or any non-resident, to complain when you have a brand new cart and we're raising the price. And I think the same logic would apply to this. But I do think, just to be clear though, it won't be raised based on the clubhouse. We have to stay competitive with the other courses in the area.
And just to touch on one other thing, just in terms of just making sure everyone's clear on the roles, that question would be addressed by the Golf Commission. The Golf Commission does have a seat on the Building Committee, so they have representation, and the Building Committee will be working with the Golf Commission, and hopefully that's a very healthy and interactive process. Also on the also on the Building Committee, excuse me, is a representative from the Parks and Rec. So they will have the eye towards the non-golf components, but ultimately what the Golf Commission decides on rates would not be part of the Building Committee process.
Yeah, I think it was a similar process with Penfield, too. It was under Park and Rec to raise those fees, but those fees were increased, especially for lockers. So I'm hoping to see that movement.
Yeah, I definitely think that the locker fees, if nothing else, as it's part of the facility, would go up. I do agree.
Any further questions or comments? Representative Spoliar.
Marcy Spoliar, District 4. I have 2 questions. I'm not a golfer, but I'm curious, are there any golf courses that don't have clubhouses? So something simple like bathrooms and a golf port, you know, I'm thinking something simple like at one of our parks or the Tunxus baseball field where we have bathrooms and we have a small concession stand. I'm thinking we're not, you know, I know it's lower class, but...
To be honest, I don't know that in existence.
Okay.
At all. Not in this area, not in Fairfield County. It is Fairfield County.
Right. And second, as a non-golfer, as a resident, do I have priority to golf at this golf course versus a non-resident? Because you speak of increasing non-resident rounds, but is that going to limit me as a resident from golfing when I want to?
Absolutely will not limit you at all. The way that, for those of you that don't know, the way that you become eligible for the resident rate at H. Smith is you buy a resident ID card. It's a $70 fee for the year, and then you're able to enjoy the non-resident rate. The resident rate, I'm sorry, the resident rate of $30. Misspoke, sorry, thank you. So if you pay the $70 golf ID, you become a Fairfield resident for the H. Smith Richardson, and you can play for the $30 resident fee. And the way that our tee time system is set up is you are able to secure a time basically 1 day earlier than non-residents. So the timekeeping system to get a tee time is open 7 days in advance for residents and then only 6 days in advance for non-residents. So this won't change that at all, no matter what happens.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the second item, which is the first part of our non-recurring capital projects, which is the golf course renovation. So I think Anthony and Ryan have to stay.
Well, at least we have the comfortable chairs tonight, so thank you guys for that. Well, I'm hoping that we're not going to spend an hour talking about this one, but
I just want to remind everyone that we have 9 other bonding items to talk about, and then an ordinance.
Exactly. So before you now is our non-recurring capital request for the 16th green rebuild and reshape. This is part of our 10-year plan. This came before. I don't think it actually reached this body last year. I think it got cut out prior to this. But this is year 8 of our 10-year plan. And we are looking for our $100,000 to reshape the 16th green as stated. Right now it has some very unusable space. It's got some steep slopes and it slows down pace of play. You can't move the holes as much, so the same areas keep getting worn out. So this plan would obviously alleviate any of those issues while still keeping the same quality, of course.
Any questions or comments on this item? Representative Bateson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Anthony, thank you. Now, since we're approaching the end of this 10-year program, $1 million, are you on track to do everything you wanted to accomplish in this plan on time and within $1 million?
Yes.
Good.
That was an easy one.
Any further questions or comments? Representative Durrell?
All right, Alex Durrell, RTM 3. The bathrooms on the golf course, is there any idea of having like a permanent bathroom somewhere as opposed to the porta potties everywhere that just permeate? Yeah, I know, but still.
There
For the women?
there has not been any talk of that, no.
It's not part of this proposal.
Any further questions or comments on this item? Representative Gale?
So I'm not sure it's to these gentlemen, it's really through you.
Please use the mic. So,
Sorry.
yeah.
Through you, Mr. Moderator, I think to Bob Mayer, I was very confused by the budget line item for the bonding amount that was in the budget per year. When I looked at, I don't have it in front of me, I'm trying to pull up the email right now, but it seemed way low considering this is the 8th year or something like that of the bond, the $100,000 per year. It was something like a $25,000 line item in terms of the interest on the bonding, and that just simply doesn't make sense. So I'm just curious as to where that figure came from, and I'd like some clarification on it.
I'm assuming you guys don't know, so.
That's definitely a
saying to
question.
Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor.
so we can talk offline and then I can try to get information from
Okay.
Bob on that. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you guys.
Thank you.
You're off the hot seat. Next, we have the Fairfield Woods Library elevator that
amortization.
Mr. Michelangelo is going to present on.
I know, but it's the problem is it doesn't make sense with the number of how much has been bonded already.
Good evening, Joseph Michelangelo, Director of Public Works. The proposal is for request for $325,000 to replace the existing elevator at Fairfield Woods Branch Library. The building was originally constructed in 1968. The elevator was carved out of a lobby atrium area with the 1990 additions. It's undersized, doesn't meet ADA requirements. I described it in the write-up as very awkward. To get into the elevator, you have to open a door, open another door, slide open a gate, close the gate, and then when you get to the lower level, you have to repeat the same process exiting the elevator too. So it's very cumbersome for a able-bodied person, and for a handicapped person, does not serve the needs to access the lower level. Lower level has about 3 or 4 smaller conference-type rooms, has one large meeting room, which is used for all kinds of functions, but primarily every day they have the Down Under program down there. So Monday through Friday at 3 o'clock, that's when they have the peak use of that facility. So it's the lower level basement, but it is a heavily utilized space. The only area of the branch library which has common meeting-type areas.
Any questions or comments on this item? Representative Iacono?
Thank you, Pamela Iacono, District 8. I watched the Board of Finance meeting, and the question came up around grants. Actually, I think it was Helen Devanzo who spoke at public comment, who's the treasurer for the town. And she mentioned that there's a lot of grants available for elevator projects. My question is, can we, or why aren't we, or will someone look into applying for the CDBG grant on this? I think this is an excellent candidate for it.
Correct, and Mark Barnhart is here today, and I have reviewed it with him. We annually go for the CBDG package, so to speak, in May. So we could either submit it for, I believe $75,000 would be eligible for this project. So at May, if the bodies decide that this is a good candidate for it, it could be allocated for that. Also, we have an existing, the current year CBDG budget has an allocation of funds, so we could also revise that. But one of the things we're doing with that money is, we're competing against our own funding. So if we, if if we decide to dedicate 75,000 to this, we may not be able to do some other projects in town, but that's another process. But yeah, potentially we're removing barriers to accessibility, so this would be a candidate for that grant.
All right, great. I'd like to see us explore all our options and make decisions collectively about the CDBG and whether or not this should be a part of it. So I'm glad you're pursuing that. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Next is the fire department's request for mobile column lifts.
Hi, I'm Kieran Dunn from the fire department. So our request is to replace our existing apparatus lifting jacks. We originally got them in 1987 from the DPW. Actually, they got them in 1987, and we got them from them in 1994. We'd like to replace them with, we're not able to get replacement parts for these jacks. They don't have the modern safeties that really are required, and they are not able to lift some of our more modern, recently purchased apparatus. We're asking you right now if we could purchase some new lifting jacks so our mechanics don't have to go under the fire engine and be in a precarious position.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the body? Representative Iacono?
Thank you, Pam Iacono, District 8. Is any of this eligible for the Assistance to Firefighters grant?
No, because this isn't firefighting equipment. This is to help our mechanics.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next up is the Railroad Bridge Tide Gates design from the Conservation Department.
Hello, Brian Carey, Conservation Director for the town. So basically, we're looking for $225,000 to start the design process to replace existing infrastructure behind Kiwanis Field. It's the primary, flood and erosion control structure that supports the berm and the tidal restoration work that the town has done since the early '80s. The problem is that this has never been upgraded, and it's really past its useful life, even after some work that's been done. In 2010, we relined the culvert pipes, but the bulkhead actually needs work now. We had a structural engineer do an assessment of it about a year ago, and it was put into a replacement program, and we're just looking at receiving funds right now to do the design work.
Any questions or comments? Representative Iacono? Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Brian, the 225, I see the excerpts you have in here also. This looks familiar. Is this from the Teagan Bond? Is this that tide gauge study that your department had done?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, so the 225, are you planning to approach your tide gate replacement town-wide, similar to what the Anthony did with the golf course? We're going to see a couple $100,000 getting bonded over a period. Is this like phase one of your plan?
So this is actually phase two. I got previously received a CDBG DR grant to start the design process for the Riverside Drive tide gates. So that's probably 6 to 8 months before this. And one of the things is that until we do the design, I won't be able to get the true engineered costs of this, and that will basically be put back into future requests.
So if I'm not mistaken, the number I recall from the Teagan Bond was like 1.2 million town-wide.
No, that's per system.
Per system. So how much
So right now, the Riverside Drive tide gates are in design which also is the East Trunk Line Sewer project. So we're looking at some feasibility engineering of trying to rework that whole system. And right now, initially I had costs of $1.2 million, but there might be some savings in some of the design work they're doing moving forward. So I won't know until we're at 50 to 80% design on that project, similar with this. Basically, they had, their initial estimates for replacement without doing any design work, was about $1.1 million. And that's
Per system, location.
so, yeah, so we're talking about two different, there's a couple other systems in town. The Riverside Drive and this one are the primary flood control structures in our dike systems in town. This one is probably more substantial than
So the
even
ones you're
that.
focusing on first are primarily flood control, not wetlands maintenance?
Well, they're all flood control and wetlands maintenance. I mean, it's pretty much the same system. So back in the day, when they built the dikes, they were only operated one way, and then they came back and put the self-regulating tide gates in that allows flushing in the marsh, but also they can also be closed during storm events. Back in the day, it was just, it went out, didn't come back in. All of these systems, you know, they were installed in the late 70s and early 80s and really haven't been touched since. And a lot of them were installed with wooden bulkheads, which is not, you know, nowadays you would never really see that put in. The one that we just did behind the Water Pollution Control and the Fire Training Center, if you go in there and look at that, that's a similar type structure that we're looking to design and build for, you know, these other systems. But each one of them is unique in its hydrology and its function as well. The one that's on Riverside Drive is integrated into a bridge for the road. So, you know, we're looking at replacing that, but then the bridge is going to still be there. So we've done some value engineering to say, you know, it might make sense just to replace the bridge and the culverts at the same time and have some cost savings in that as well. But again, nothing has been done on these since the late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of it is critical infrastructure. And after, you know, Irene and Sandy, you begin to see, you know, the wear that was occurring on these. So unfortunately, you know, it's been maintained, but it just gets to a point where, you know, you can't maintain, you know, wood that's rotting. It just needs to be replaced.
So this one, this 225, this is your engineering studies, this is the one with the old bridge that went over to Tomlinson, that one?
Well, behind Kiwanis Field.
That one, so you got your three down there, so this is for the study, and you anticipate it's going to be upwards of 1.2 million total construction?
I mean, that's, you know, again, that's an engineer's estimate from them going out there and looking at, you know, the structural members of the culvert system, the bulkhead wall, and the dike. You know, I'm not saying that they go out there and do geotechnical study and say, we have a major problem here with the, you know, with the construction of the dike or at that point. I don't know. I mean, we're doing this so I can come back at a future point and say, this is what it costs to fix it.
How many of these tide gates locations do we have?
So again, the Riverside Drive and this one are the most critical, meaning that they are the largest, but we, you know, throughout town, there's probably 10 different sites that have tide gates. But some of them, again, these are the biggest ones that are incorporated into the actual flood and erosion control dike structures that have a lot of houses behind them.
And the only ones that have been touched since the 70s are the ones at Riverside and this that we're talking about now?
No, those are the ones that we're going to design right now. I mean, there's been ongoing maintenance or, you know, relining of the culverts, but to actually replace the bulkhead, which is the main structure, no, that's never been done.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the body? Representative Beauvais?
Lauren Beauvais, District 7. My question is what level of threat to homeowners' property is there if we don't do anything pretty soon to maintain these wooden, rotten structures holding back the water?
So you're asking me to give absolute. If we have
No.
a hurricane tomorrow, could all this fail no matter what, even if we replace it? Yes. Is it going to fail tomorrow? No. Is it going to
Like,
fail 3 years from now? More likely. Is it going to fail 10 years from now? Probably.
Well, I'm pretty sure it'll be sooner than that. But my concern is, like, I'm wondering how many homes are going to be impacted during a catastrophic event should these not do their job.
Again, I mean, when you have a hurricane, you know, I used to deal with a lot of tree work, and people would say, is that tree going to fall over? And I'd say, it could. You know,
No,
if a
I don't-
hurricane comes, your tree's going to fall over.
I don't think
But-
I'm asking my question right. I'm wanting to know the level of homes impacted
It would be significant
by
because
lack
you'd have
of water
to-
maintenance.
So if this were to fail during a hurricane, which, again, I mean, the dikes themselves could be overtopped with a typical hurricane. But, if we were to have, let's say, the 50-year storm, which this would be built to withstand if it was functioning properly, and it were to fail at that point, you'd have significant flooding along South Pine Creek Road. To tell you which houses exactly are going to flood, I couldn't tell you that. I mean, we could look at elevations on a map, and I could say this one would likely flood, this one will flood, this one would likely flood.
But there are a lot of residents
Yes.
that are going to be impacted.
Yes, they're being protected by the dike, and the point of these structures is it's put into the flood and erosion control structures that that the dike is protecting from all these homes along South Pine Creek Road and really up into Thorpe Street. There's a couple redundancies in this that we're also looking at removing that probably don't need to be there anymore, which would have some cost savings. But again, I don't know that until we do the study.
Right. I actually went through a 50-year storm twice, so I really can speak for the importance of maintaining these structures and upgrading them.
Yep.
Further questions? Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. You said you're building them to the 50-year flood level?
No, right now this dike is at elevation 12, so the 100-year storm would be elevation 15. It's already topping over that.
Right, so these new structures that we would put in, they would be to the 100-year
It would
storm
be
level?
Our design standard right now, before we start that, is something that we would spec within our request. So we would look at exactly what standard it would be designed to before it's being designed. Meaning it would most likely would be 100 plus, 100-year storm plus a foot. But the problem is the dike next to it is not part of this project. And if you don't raise the dike to the same level as this, then that it's just going to go up and around it. But at some point, as sea level rise occurs and coastal storms are occurring, I know it's a plan to basically look at raising the dike system in South Pine Creek. When and if that's going to happen, I don't know. There was previously money that was actually moved as part of a pre-existing community development block grant to the Riverside Drive project because the Army Corps wasn't going to get the money to do that study. But those are significant costs, above and beyond, this project.
Well, as someone who lives in a floodplain and who is being required by FEMA to raise my house to a 100-year or even a 200-year in order to get the state grant to lift your home, I think it's probably in our best interest to look at this holistically and make sure that we don't throw money at something at a flood level plain that will then have to be torn up.
No, so the way the system works right now is people don't experience flooding because the system's there. If you were to remove that system, they would experience flooding with the daily tidal.
No, I understand. I walk back there a lot, so I've seen them in work, in practice.
Yeah, I mean, the dike, if you walk out to the end where there's
Right.
that point, I mean, the dike, that used to be the dike that went over towards the dump there.
Okay.
And that's when they removed that and put this system in. So all of that area out from the point back to this area is what was really restored as part of the tidal wetland.
Okay, I'm just saying, look at it holistically, please. Thank you very much.
Any further questions or comments from the body? Seeing none, thank you. Oh, sorry, Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. I think I want to clarify in your memo there's a page that lists the priority levels of the different projects, and I just want to make sure that priority level 1 project, the Turney Creek at Riverside Drive, that has already had money allocated towards it,
Yep,
right?
we have
Okay.
a grant to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Next is the IT department's request for the data center relocation.
Hi, I'm Dave Kelly, the Town IT Director. This proposal is to get the town's on-premise data centers out of basements below sea level within a mile of the sound. I'm new to town. I looked around, and this was kind of a red flag for me that are fairly expensive and important assets that our public safety department and our DPW depends on in order to help the town during a storm are all vulnerable themselves to water damage, as well as just other kinds of other risks. We have two on-premise data centers, one in the police department and one for town. I don't think the town needs two separate data centers anymore. The current data center is an 800 square foot professionally built room, built back in the 70s, I believe, but it houses one 7 square foot rack full of equipment. So this proposal is to consolidate all of the town's data assets to a safer place on the second floor of a secure building in town, and hopefully reduce costs going down the road. The existing data center has a near end-of-life air conditioning unit and an end-of-life battery-backed UPS system. I don't think it makes any sense to invest money to keep things as they are, where they are.
Any questions or comments from the body on this item? Representative Beauvais?
My question, Lauren Beauvais, District 7. My question to you is, are there any avenues to pursue for just using someone else's off-site data center and not having that to maintain and deal with?
Sure. Actually, when I arrived in town, there was already a project underway to move the backup data center that was located in the basement of the Fairfield Woods Branch Library to a co-location facility in Trumbull, Connecticut. And we're actually just finishing up that project right now. But that costs almost $20,000 a year to rent that space. Plus, there are the costs of improving the communication lines between town and that remote site. We would need to do that 2 more times because we have 2 racks worth of equipment. So that $20,000 a year is for 1 rack's worth of data server equipment. So you're looking at almost $40,000 a year plus communication costs to rent a space elsewhere. The advantages is it can be far away from the shore. It can be in a safe place. The drawbacks is that it gets expensive over time. It's less expensive to keep the systems within town-owned space in town in the long run.
I noticed the enterprise systems are usually, they're not having anything on site anymore. They're tapping into off-site systems that are maintained and managed by someone else.
About half of the town's IT systems right now are either hosted with a vendor, purchased software as a service, or they are partially in town, partially hosted. A lot of hybrids. We have a lot of hybrid systems, but many of our town systems are not eligible for. They're not designed to work in the cloud on the outside. The other thing is that we have a tremendous amount of data. All of our GIS maps and all of our town data, there's a lot of data, and it's fairly expensive to buy that in the cloud. If we were running a small business and we just needed a website somewhere, there would be nothing less expensive than to just go to the cloud and rent something from someplace. And indeed, the town's website, the fairfieldct.org website, is hosted with an outside vendor. But there's just a certain amount of systems that are not able to be sent outsourced to the cloud cost effectively.
So the last bit is, how robust is this plan?
How robust?
Do you see yourself having to come back in the near future and do a lot more architecting?
I should hope not. I've estimated the cost of doing this, outfitting a space in the police department, to be roughly $250,000. We would do a $5,000 or $10,000 engineering study to make sure the space will work and that the floor can support the weight of the equipment and things like that. But I think that this will take care of the town for the foreseeable future. In general, I don't expect our space needs or our equipment needs to grow much over time. There has been a gradual trend toward shrinkage, but for the foreseeable future, we're going to need at least 2 equipment racks worth of space.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on this item? Representative Lefkowitz?
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. I don't totally know what I'm talking about, but is part of this consideration security relate? Like, have we thought about protections and firewall protections and hacking and
Well,
is that,
we have that in place now.
but will it add to, so there's no additional stuff happening, and if it does, would it add to our space needs?
I don't expect anything to add to our space needs. There is the increased physical protection of this being on the second floor of a building, and you can't get better security than a police department for physical security. But I don't expect that any firewalls or anything we do are going to get any bigger or require more space.
Anything else on this item? Representative Gerber?
Hi, Bill Gerber, District 2. I just have a question about the cloud. For disaster recovery, I mean, my own experience is doing backup in the cloud relatively cheaply, where it's just sort of periodically backed up, and then you can draw it down to your systems if needed. Is Trumbull really an appropriate location for disaster, for backup if some event hits, this area? Aren't you concerned, about both going down?
Well, frankly, I didn't select Trumbull. That project was begun before I arrived. But I think the likelihood of the same storm having the same effect on both Fairfield and Trumbull, it's 10 or 15 miles away. There's the possibility. Would I rather it be in Vermont or something? Sure. But the reality is that we have to maintain the systems. And as it is, my systems administrator, when he has to go visit the Trumbull site, he's gone for hours. There's a trade-off in cost and distance. I think that generally speaking, the site in Trumbull is pretty secure and pretty well maintained and has generator backup and whatnot. So I think it's a reasonable. I think it's a reasonable move.
But you wouldn't do backup in the cloud?
Well, that is something I'm going to be looking at this summer. My concern, though, is the cost. It's a lot of times people have the assumption that the cloud is always less expensive. That's not necessarily the case. So I actually want to run the numbers and see. If we're not backing up to the cloud, we'll be backing up to a warehouse in Windsor or something like that. We'll have some trade-off like that. The other thing is the Trumbull Data Center can be pressed into service if our data centers here are out for some reason. So I feel pretty good about the project. Would I have liked to have gone further? In some ways, yes. In some ways, I don't think it's a big difference.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on this item? Representative Lopez?
Hi, Erin Lopez, District 2. I saw just the cons that you listed was that it's unclear that the building will have power even with backup generators during some sort of flooding event. And I saw that, in previous storms, the firefighters were physically pumping water to keep everything safe when it was in a basement. I'm guessing that things have been upgraded since the catastrophic storms that we've had, so I'm just wondering if you have a better sense of what we have is better than we did before in terms of we're probably going to keep power. It is a police department. They do, they are a first responder and things like that.
Well, I don't think that Town Hall was where they were doing the pumping to defend the building. I don't think that a lot has changed there. I'm new to town, so I don't have the whole history of what's happened since, but I don't think a lot has changed there. The police department is at a somewhat higher elevation than Town Hall. It actually happens, even though I've written that it's in the 100-year floodplain, it happens that the floodplain wraps around the police department. So technically the police department is elevated a bit, but it is still possible that yes, there's a generator on the berm and there's the building, but it's possible that underground cables and switch gear in the basement of the building may not have been thought about when they thought about trying to keep the building alive during a water event. But I'm still avoiding the disaster of having the equipment be destroyed. So even in a very severe storm, if the police station did actually go dark and they had to move out, at least our equipment is on the second floor of the building. It's not going to be bathed in salt water or fresh water for that matter. So I think it's a substantial improvement at a reasonable cost. It's kind of a trade-off of cost and risk and whatnot.
Anything else on this item? Seeing nothing, thank you. Next up, we have the Board of Ed. And it's capital non-recurring requests.
Mr. Moderator, before we start, does any members need a copy of the booklet? I brought some extras.
Does anyone want a copy of the book?
I will.
Ones we print.
Yeah, I don't need it.
Just the side of the room.
Easy, I shouldn't have called you over.
We can't afford that either, so.
Let's amend the bond. Okay, so the first one on our list is the security infrastructure.
Yes, thank you. For the record, I'm Tom Cullen, Executive Director of Operations for Fairfield Public Schools. Here tonight is Dr. Tony Jones, Superintendent. Sal Morbido is Manager, Construction, Security, and Safety. And Nancy Burns is our Director of IT. So our first request is the security infrastructure. This is our year 4 request. We've had 3 years requesting security infrastructure upgrades at the schools. The item starts on page 1. And this is in concert with the work we've been doing with the police department to make adjustments and upgrades for security and infrastructure at the schools. This request happens to be a funding request to complete on Phase 1 and Phase 2 the intrusion panels on the windows of the schools. So when we first made the request 3 years ago for security infrastructure for intrusion panels, we were working with the police on what type of product we wanted. It was leaning more towards a ballistic glazing material. With the testing and reporting that the police did on the products, they then changed their tune and wanted to do more of an intrusion panel that's mounted on the windows. So because of that, as we bid the projects and started doing all of the schools, we found that we need this amount of money to complete those 2 phases. So this request isn't a new phase for anything new. It's really to complete Phase 1 and 2.
Any questions from members of the body on just the security infrastructure? Representative Vergara?
Jill Vergara, District 7. So these are intrusion panels that are melted onto the windows?
Yes.
What sense does it have to have extra security on windows that are open a large percentage of the year because there's no air conditioning in our schools?
Well, the intrusion panels are mounted in the locations that are most vulnerable on the school building. I can't go into a real lot of detail about the construction and the plan we worked with the police on. But some of the windows that have the intrusion panels can open. Some of them don't. They're fixed. A good majority of our schools are air-conditioned or have mechanical means of fresh air, which is what we really want. But we do still have some older schools that don't have mechanical means of fresh or air conditioning yet. And we're working on that. But there are other security measures that are being done at all of the schools besides the intrusion panels that are all working in concert to protect the school building and the occupants.
Do you have, go ahead.
Yeah. How much has been spent over these past 3-4 years on security?
I can pull that if you want me to get that. Yeah, that's what I want. Thank you very much. So let's see if we have a total. I don't have them totaled, but I have them by year. 2015, 2016, our request and spending was $1,752,000. 2016, 2017, our request and spending was $2,000,000 $20,692. Our third phase and request for 2017-18 was $335,000. And then you would add this request for 18-19 of $345,250.
And there are no federal grants available to help fund?
Yes, there are grants.
Oh, there are, but
We applied the first year it was sent out by the state of Connecticut, and Fairfield was awarded a grant of about $147,000 and change. The next 2 years, there were not grants available, and this fourth year, Salem Morbido did apply last year, and we just found out that it was accepted. It was around $104,000 of our $290,000 request.
thank you.
Representative Kelly?
Alice Kelly, District 4. You mentioned something about the original plan having something to do with ballistics. Is that what is that what you said?
Ballistic glazing 3 years ago
That would
was
be
the intent.
bulletproofing? Yes. So
It's not bulletproof. The ballistic glazing would mean that a perpetrator could smash the glass in all its pieces and get through the opening. So a bullet would pass through it, but it wouldn't shatter the whole window so that they could just jump through the big opening.
So this is really designed just to keep people out, not what happened in Florida where somebody got into the schools and was actually shooting through the windows of the classrooms.
Correct. To prevent entry.
Has there been thought given to bulletproofing some of the windows so that that could not happen?
Yes, but it's extremely expensive.
Any further questions? Representative Lefkowitz?
Hi, Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. So in light of the fact that there have been 240 school shootings since the shooting at the Sandy Hook School, I'd be curious to know, you looked at a plan in the months, I imagine, and the year following, but are you keeping current in terms of what is kind of top of the line? And I would also say that a lot of these shootings didn't happen just within the school walls. They've happened at extracurricular events, in courtyards, on playgrounds, so it's obviously more of a concern than just ballistic shielding on glass windows that may or may not be open. So I'd be curious what a more comprehensive plan looks like.
Yes, this is just one project. The 3 phases in money we requested were multiple things done at the schools, all in concert with the Fairfield Police Department working with us.
And is, obviously, some of it you can't talk about, but where could parents, constituents find out more about what the schools are doing?
I mean, I guess they could come in and meet with us to go over some details. We can't share a lot of specifics in public, but Chief McNamara will be at the next town safety meeting and probably can help you with some of those questions too.
Representative Walk?
I'm sorry, I just believe that Chief McNamara is going to be at the Board of Ed hearing on the budget, also to speak to safety. I just saw it on Twitter earlier.
Just to speak to the school safety aspect, we do work very closely with our police department, ongoing, not just after something tragic happens. We are reviewing constantly, not only in how we handle our drills, how we're keeping our buildings safe. The window that you were talking about in the classroom, that's something that we have as educators dealt with. Really going back to Columbine, those windows are called shooter's windows if you're talking about school safety, which is frightening, but that's why we practice our drills to get kids away from those windows in the classrooms. And working with law enforcement, they've been able to give us techniques that help us overcome some of those items. I know that all this is not obviously on the agenda tonight, but what they're referencing with the meeting is the Board of Ed has a town hall on the 28th, and what we have done as of today was restructure that town hall hall to be a little bit different than we would normally have, which is just open answering questions. But the chief of police, the chief of our fire department, myself, we're going to join the Board of Ed for the first part of that meeting as a panel on safety to be able to, first of all, update what we can for the community in everything that we have been doing on going to keep our children and our staff safe, and then also to be able to answer questions from the public. So I just want you to know there is an opportunity that is coming very quickly to be able to do that.
And I just want to follow up with a comment, if I could, to that. Just that talking about public relations, as we have on some of the issues earlier, I think now more than ever, it's really important that you are getting the messaging out, because there are a lot of parents who are frankly, and educators who are frankly totally freaked out. So I think that's really helpful, and I'm appreciative of that effort. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Representative Wolk.
Jay Wolk, District 5. Just to follow up on Representative Kelly's concerns on the type of glass that you're using for the front doors. I'm aware that it is type of glass that if they do shoot into the glass, it will not completely shatter. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Adam Lanza, and that's how he entered Sandy Hook School, by shooting his way through the front doors. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's how he entered. So if we can shore up the front doors and not have that happen again, at least that's one part, we're stopping from somebody entering our schools. So I appreciate everything that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Representative Smay.
Ruth Smay, District 5. Is this the only company that you approached for this film on the doors and windows? Because
This was a competitive bid, and we had 3 bidders for this
Okay,
this
'cause
particular facet of the work.
I saw one on, forgive me, but Channel 8 the other night. Did you all see that? And it was a film done, and there are police officers, and they created this film. And theirs will survive impact of bullets and stuff. You can't break into it. So it seems like a more durable than what you're talking about here.
There's a lot of products. We went through a testing phase where we tested a lot of these products that were referred to us. Some of them were I saw on Channel 8 or I found on Facebook type of queries. When you actually put the products to the test for our environment, there are provisions that they make. If you really get down to the fine print, the glass has to be a certain thickness, it has to be a certain type. There's many types of glasses. Once you get that, it's not the material that we have, the thickness that we have, and the product doesn't perform the way that we had this wonderful video showing us. We ended up on this particular product that's in the book after testing many products, and we put out a request for people to bring their products to us so that we could test them. So it wasn't just made, gee whiz, that looks good. It was after actual testing.
But this one defender, I think is what it's called, and the police officers said that they were offering it to the schools at a reasonable amount of money because they want to be sure that children are safe. So that was my reason for bringing it up, and so their product seemed like it was a much stronger product than this was, that this is. I don't know.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Obviously, anytime a tragedy happens, there is a lot of marketing that happens to schools. We are very, very careful about the products that we choose, and I will say I do have experience with exactly what you're talking about. My previous district, made a different decision to go with the film. I will say our product is superior to that in that what people forget about with the film is that it's very strong, but kids actually love to pick and poke on things, and you can scratch it. And then once you actually start to see it, part of it is having it not visible, so that the people don't know that it's actually there. So that part was kind of a flaw in the film, which I believe this is a much better product.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next part of the request, the IT Cat 6 electrical project.
Thank you. This project is an information technology project. It's actually phase 2 of a 2-phase project. We requested an amount of $200,000 last year in non-recurring, to do all the elementary schools. And this request in the booklet before you tonight is for the secondary schools. So it's a program to bring all of the old Cat 5 wiring in the school system up to Cat 6. And where we have a duplex outlet at all of these locations, we're requiring them to change that out to a quad outlet, which would be 4 outlets. So,
Are there any questions or comments on this item from the body? Representative Siebert?
Joe Siebert, District 5. What is the, from a data capacity standpoint, going to Cat 6, what do you think the life shelf, given the increasing data demands that occur in a data center versus going more long-term?
The Cat 6 that we're talking about is actually connecting our audiovisual projectors so that we can remotely control them, anticipate failure, that sort of thing. Given the state of projection systems, I don't expect to see a dramatic change in the load on any of that cable. But it's important for us to have those capabilities because at this point we have almost 1,000 projectors across all the classrooms in the district, and we haven't increased our staff to run out and change bulbs or adjust capacity or calibration. So this is really an opportunity for us to be able to do that, to keep instruction moving along. As you can imagine, one of the things I teach anybody in my staff is you don't reclaim educational time that's lost. So if a teacher is planning on using that projection system, we want to make sure it's up as 99% of the time, if not 100. And this will help us do that.
So you don't expect that you'd have to do another rip and replace for another, what, 5 to 6 years? Or?
Yeah, at a minimum.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the Fairfield Ludlow High student parking lot replacement.
okay, this project is at the Fairfield Ludlow High School. It's the student parking lot in the back. It's a very large project that we can't fund with our Board of Ed operating budget. We have a paving account. We try and do 4 or 5 schools, small areas each year to keep a rolling update of the paving needs. But this is a very large parking lot that's failing. It's to remove all of the bituminous material and reclaim it, and then to check the base of the whole parking lot out, the sub-base, then reinstall new bituminous material packed down, including some new speed tables that we're using across the district, especially at the high schools, restripe and renumber.
Are there any questions or comments on this item? Representative Herron?
Hi, Doreen Herron, District 9. When were these pictures taken? Because I think it looks worse than this. And I'm actually being serious just because I really think it looks worse than this, so I just wanted to check what pictures we're looking at.
I believe page 17 might be a reused picture from 2 years ago, but the other 2 are brand new from this past year.
Brand new on the left?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Georgiadis?
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Is all the lighting and all the other structures that have sort of fallen down and been knocked over the years in that parking lot, everything is ready to go, so that if you pave around it, you're not going to have to
Yes.
rip anything up to put in the lights?
No. What we did is in that specific parking lot, the architectural team, when we renovated that school in 2004 and 5, they did have some lighting structures in the middle of the parking lot with bollards, and they were getting hit by plows. They were getting hit by some students. So what we did is we worked through the years to push that lighting to the perimeter, try and get it into the islands and get it into the perimeter of the parking lot. And we've been successful with that. And then we had the solar carport system go in place, and with that project we asked that we had lighting put under the solar carport to help the parking lot. So all of those items have been taken away. We have junction boxes now in the ground that aren't seen, and we're ready to repave and do it right.
Okay, so this is the final
Good question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Bateson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bates in District 1. We're reclaiming the parking lot, so that means you're going to take up all the old asphalt, or we're laying on top?
We're taking up all the old asphalt, reclaiming it.
So has whatever contractor you've talked to, have they done their due diligence? We already know that the base under there, it's crushed gravel, whatever they need. Is there a chance that they're going to lift up the park and say, oh my God, it's not a suitable base?
There's a
Now
small,
it's 500.
there's a small chance they might have to add something to the base, but DPW is working with us to help with any drainage issues that we might need to revise, and any sub-base that might have
So
to be
you're
added to a
confident
certain
once we
point.
lift up the parking lot, it's not going to get out of control if the base is not?
Very confident. We did this same project at Fairfield Ward High School in the back by the Blake Tennis Courts. Same type of project.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Gerber?
Hey, Don, Bill Gerber,
Hi.
District 2. Sorry, Dr. Jones. It's a little awkward. Thank you. Thanks. So I'm trying to remember what happened last year. I believe this was on the docket last year. I can't remember why it didn't happen last year. And I also remember the cost last year was $250,000. So why is it $25,000 more? Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, it was a request last year and non-recurring. It was rejected by the Board of Selectmen last year. And the increase in $25,000 is for the state contractors originally bid it, escalation, and the possibility that we may have to engineer some work and go out to bid because of the cost. So we put a little contingency in there for that.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the IT switch replacement project.
Okay, this project starts on page 19. This is a very large project that we brought to the Town of Fairfield Capital Summit Workshop in September. So it's fairly new to the Board of Ed facility plan and waterfall schedule. It's a much larger project of 2 phases equaling $2,013,880. At the Financial Capital Summit, they asked us if we could consider breaking it into 2 phases, and so that's what we've done. We've got 2 phases of the work, switch replacement work, one for this year and one for next year requesting.
Any questions or comments on this item? Representative Bateson?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Bates in District 1. I see this as a new item on the capital plan. I don't recall seeing this before, and it has a little footnote saying it's new. What precipitates something of this size to become new? Is this just the way technology is being used throughout the school system now, that there's just increased demand, there's no capacity? I don't know anything about this stuff. I just want to know, like, is this something that the internet usage is going to keep escalating? Is this just something, we're just chasing this?
The actual anticipation of the cost of replacing our local area network switches, which this project is, was anticipated almost 7 years ago and was in my planning budget for the operating budget for the Board of Ed. With the fiscal climate being what it was, and because the last time we bought switches, which was just shy of 10 years ago, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance at the time shifted from the operating budget about $500,000 of that project into a short-term non-recurring bond. At the time, I believe they wanted to fund an IBNR shortfall, so they basically flip-flopped, took the $500,000 out of operating, said let's do that as a long-term capital plan or a short-term capital plan, and use a non-recurring bond because it is infrastructure. So before we threw it in our operating budget this year and knowing what the impact would be, and because we really do need it, and I'll explain that, I'll expound on that in a minute, we approached the Board of Finance and asked them if they would consider it based on their rules about not bonding technology, and reminded them about what had happened historically. And that's why it's coming to you the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Also, too, I see in here you're talking about E-rate grants, and that's something that's not taken, this is a gross appropriation you're asking for.
This is for the first half. What we will do is we're actually filing the grant. I actually hope to put the bid out tomorrow. The grant is not guaranteed until they file it. If we are awarded the grant, then we will apply that and only ask for the net amount that's required to finish the project.
Who applies for the grant, the Town of Fairfield or the Board of Education?
It's through the Board of Education. I actually manage the grant.
Okay. Tom, maybe you can follow up tomorrow and just make sure that that these resolutions, they all always refer to the Town of Fairfield asking for reimbursement. You should talk to Stanton Lesser and see if your bond resolutions, or talk to bond counsel and see if it needs to be revised to include Board of Education asking for grants too, just to cover your...
Okay.
Representative Lefkowitz.
Nancy Lefkowitz, District 1. I see here that current projects that require the switch capacity, it says the expansion of security cameras. Is that under the school safety piece, and implementing some of those school safety measures? Is that only if...
There's a term that you may have heard in the newspapers called the Internet of Things, and that's what life has actually turned into. So our local area network switches are the things that we throw in closets. Dave Tuttle used to say it's not the sexy stuff like you like to talk about, but it's the one thing that makes all of those systems work. Whether you're talking about wireless access points in the ceiling that give everybody the option of using all your tablets and laptops I see here, giving the security folks the opportunity to be able to remotely see what's going on through a camera that's also using the same system, door mechanisms that make sure we're locking things down, and of course computers, access to the internet, access to resources that are in the cloud, and anything hybrid. It's all part of that puzzle. So these are the things that allow the wall jack that you plug your stuff into, or that your access point is plugged into, to communicate to all the other parts of the world that it needs to communicate to do whatever that function of that device is.
I get that, but so the point is that we'd have to approve the $900,000 in order to effectively put the security measures that we talked about earlier into place?
I don't think so.
I think she's asking, our security does rely on technology.
The security does rely on technology, but I don't believe the window project has any connection to that. Some of the prior activity that was funded included the camera systems, and that definitely is having an impact on the switches and is definitely one of the reasons where we're asking to replace them. Does that help?
It's just a complicated puzzle because
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Further questions? Sorry. Further questions or comments? Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. So I don't see high school Wi-Fi access improving here. Is that right?
The high school Wi-Fi has been taken care of for the last 2 years. We've upgraded both systems. We did Ward 2 years ago and Ludlow last summer. Increased capacity and throughput in both systems. Now, the local area network switches we're talking about putting in will help that because, again, we're talking complicated puzzle. You've got an access point that has capacity on it. It's like I-95 at rush hour.
Yeah.
It's got 3 lanes of traffic, and if there's no traffic, you're doing fine. But as soon as you put more and more stuff on there,
1,200 kids.
yeah, the pipe gets smaller. So we took care of the access point part. Now we've got to take care of the stuff in the closets to eliminate all those bottlenecks and increase capacity so that we can keep up with the number of devices the kids are using.
Understood, but it doesn't look like you're touching the high schools with this?
No, the first year is touching the high schools.
Expansion and upgrade of, okay, so the Wi-Fi itself is not in high school, but you're saying the backup behind it will improve in the high
Because
schools?
the Wi-Fi has already been taken care of at
I
the
see,
high school level.
but the kids may, and the teachers may get improved Wi-Fi because of this phase 1
We'll
here.
get improved service altogether.
Yeah.
Yes, whether we're talking about the camera system or we're talking about internet access.
Got it.
We've done a lot of infrastructure work. For point of reference, we split our network up for internet access. Our wide area network, meaning the connection between all the schools, used to all congregate here at Kings Highway. And what we've done now is each of the K-8 schools hangs off of one of the two high schools. They always did, but then they all congregated up to us. What we did was we put 2 new circuits at each of the high schools, so they don't have to do that extra hop. They get right out to the internet through the state network. And that's allowed some capacity improvement. But because our switches are as old as they are, we had to do a little bit of workaround to make those connections work. By doing this project, we're going to eliminate some of those bottlenecks and improve the throughput and take advantage of the bandwidth that we're paying for.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Representative Bove?
My question to you is, the switches are really super old. They're at the end of their life span. What I'm wondering about is the software that it's running on them. Does that work still? Is it able to be secure anymore?
We're not at the end of life of that. What it does do is it doesn't allow us to take advantage of some of the greater capacity that we have with the network connections that we have. But the software that runs the switches still operates. There's probably an end of life on it at some point. There's certain functionality that doesn't really work well, and it's hard to get support on it. But we're loping along.
Okay, thank you. That was Lauren Bove, District 7. Sorry.
Further questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, that's it for the Board of Ed.
Thank you very much.
So next we have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund ordinance. I'm going to help present, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Representative McDermott. So Phil Piers, District 4. So this is the first time we're getting this ordinance, just so everyone's aware. It's going to hold over until next month. Next month we'll vote on it. This essentially is the creation of a bank account for the town that can be used to promote affordable housing in the town. Other towns like Darien and New Canaan have done this in the past. It doesn't have a direct impact on our tax rate. We could fund it through a line item in the budget, which would, but we don't have to under this ordinance. We can fund it through a zoning regulation that will allow for a fee on different building permits or other things in the town. It could be funded through grants or other means. So all this ordinance does is just allow the town to accept the funds for this purpose. A separate discussion is how we actually fund it. And then a separate discussion, which the ordinance lays out a plan for that, or how a procedure, would be how we decide on how it gets spent. And one thing I wanted to point out to members of the body is that the version that was circulated with this month's agenda did not include the final amendment from LNA. So Section 2C is supposed to have a line that says, however, in the event that work is performed by departments of the town of Fairfield pursuant to this ordinance, the cost of said work may be reimbursed from the fund under Section 3B. So the reason that was added in is that if the town is doing work, the purpose of this is not to fund town departments, but if the town does the work, then we can reimburse them for the cost. So I don't know, Steve or Mark, if you have anything to add on why this is being requested, or?
Steve Grothwall. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. As I'm sure everybody understands, the town has a need, and a growing need, for affordable housing and workforce housing. Land is scarce, costs are high, and every year it becomes more difficult for us to try to provide the housing that we need. In addition, we have what some might consider an unfunded mandate through 830G that requires us to provide housing. And if we don't, then developers come in. I think it's illustrative, if you look at what New Canaan did. So they set up their housing trust fund, and they used the money that they got to not only get the site that they wanted and get the density they wanted, but they got the design they wanted. And so they got everything they needed, and they got 100% of the units affordable, and they got a moratorium. And so this is another tool for us. It's another arrow in the quiver. Doesn't solve all of our needs, but gives us another opportunity to provide the housing where the town thinks and how it should look and the density it should be at. Thank you.
So we can take questions if anybody has any.
Any questions from the body? Seeing none? Sorry. Representative Farnham, please use the mic.
I don't want to get in trouble. So there is no new revenue stream earmarked for this, correct?
The ordinance does not specify a particular revenue stream. It creates options for funding it.
What do you believe are the most likely options for funding?
It's really a separate discussion, but I would say, I would say, I don't know what Steve or Mark would say, I would say probably a surcharge on building permits or probably grants. Donations, yeah.
Some communities have used it to provide for an inclusionary zoning fee. Others have received donations of funds or grants, as indicated, that go into a dedicated fund for this purpose. So those would probably be the more logical avenues that we would pursue, working with other bodies such as the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So one just follow-up. So I see the need for this. I understand this is a great way to address and get the right type of developments into our town. My only hesitation on when this was originally kind of being mulled around was the idea of what was at one time being considered kind of a large surcharge on permitting fees, and that's where my only level of pause is on this. Otherwise, I applaud your effort. Thank you.
Were you acknowledging me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hannah Gale, District 6, sorry. I didn't quite hear what you said about there being some sort of a law that if we don't comply with some sort of affordable housing requirement, then the developers would come in. Could you explain what you said there? I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry if I was inarticulate about that, but 830G is, we've been talking about and dealing with it in the town for a number of years, and that's what it is. 830G has the mandate for all towns in Connecticut. If you're under 10% affordable, then developers can come in, propose, and they don't have to adhere to local zoning other than industrial. And so if the town decides that they don't like the development, they don't like the size or the design or something, then the developer can take the town to court, and it is the town's obligation to defend that decision. Usually it's the other way around.
So just to put it a different way, so normally a town gets to decide how property in the town is developed because it has zoning regulations, but 830G doesn't let that happen. What this ordinance does is it lets us create a pool of money where we can actually decide how we want to build out affordable housing in our town. And New Canaan did that, and they used that to get a moratorium. And in New Canaan, they funded it with inclusionary zoning fees on building permits.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I guess it's time to adjourn into our committees and see everybody on Monday night.
If there's any follow-up.